Hello Year 6, welcome back to Term 2. I know that we haven't finished our terrace houses yet, but I think we might finish those back at school and start the term off with an Indian-inspired artwork. And I thought we would do that today because you're starting a new unit of work in HSIE called Diverse Asia. And so I thought this might be a good way to start the term and integrate your novel, your HSIE, and your art all into one. Now, I'm not sure if you recognize this building. It's called the Taj Mahal and it is in India. And it has a very, very fascinating story if any of you wanted to go and research it afterwards. It was basically built by an emperor to house the tomb of his wife. And it's quite a building. If it was to be built today using Australian dollars, it would cost $1.5 billion to build. So it's quite a significant structure. It's actually ivory white. The reason why it's blue in this picture is because there's two ponds, big ponds in front of the Taj Mahal, and so the idea of this picture is that it's reflecting the ponds onto the white. So before we start, I want to remind you just to make sure that you're pausing the video throughout. When I'm doing something, I often pause the video myself, so don't feel like you've got to keep up with me. I'll often pause it so you're not watching me do something really long and boring. Let's go through the things that you need so you can quickly go and get those now. You need your watercolors that I'm hoping that you all picked up from school. You'll need a pair of scissors to cut out your Taj Mahal. You'll need a pencil, an eraser, a black texter. I'm using a fine line marker. If you've got a permanent marker or an art liner, that would be great, but nothing too thick. You'll also need some glue and some water and a paintbrush. So now would be a good time to pause your video and go and get all of those things so you've got everything on your table ready to go. Now this artwork has got two main parts. You'll obviously need your visual arts diary. I forgot to mention that, but you'll need 2 pages from your visual arts diary. One of those pages ripped out for the Taj Mahal, and the other one that we're going to use as our background. I'm going to pop that to the back for now. So the first part of the Taj Mahal art is we need to draw the Taj Mahal. So I'm going to, so you can see what I'm drawing, I'm going to be moving this closer, and I'm going to be not speaking so much because if I move this close and my head is turned, you won't be able to hear my instructions anyway. But the first thing we need to do is identify a rough halfway mark. I haven't got a ruler on me now, so one of the ways that I use to identify a rough halfway mark is by using my hands. So I put both of my hands onto the artwork, and you can see in between my thumbs there is the halfway mark. First thing you're going to do is draw a line for your first halfway mark. And we use this just so our drawing is symmetrical, the same on both sides and quite well centered. Okay, so firstly we're going to draw a rectangle. Actually, sorry, firstly we're going to draw a big line across and then another line underneath it. And then we're going to draw a rectangle in the center there. And then another rectangle around the outside. And then at this point here of our first rectangle, in line with that, we're going to draw 2 smaller rectangles on each side. Now above this rectangle, we're going to start to draw our dome shape. So I'm going to draw a small rectangle here. And we're going to draw 2 towers on the side here that start off about that thick, and they get a little bit thinner as you go up. So I'll just stop talking and draw those domes. They're not great, so I've fixed those up a little bit, maybe a little bit thicker. Just remember to keep on pausing this video so you can fix up your picture when you go. It's not supposed to be a perfect architectural sketch, so don't worry too much about wonky lines and things like that. That's the effect that we are going for. I'm just going to draw in two little rectangles on the insides of these two closest rectangles. And add that detail. Some spears up the top. Now I'm going to add some windows and some doors. Now we will add a little bit more detail now, but that's enough. We're ready to add our paint. So we're going to be using a watercolor technique where we actually paint the area that we're going to be adding color to in water first. And don't worry about being too neat because we are going to be cutting our Taj Mahal out. So we can go out of the lines a little bit. Move it a bit closer so you can see. And then always add a little bit extra to the first place where you added the water because it dries quite quickly. And we're going to start with light blue. And we're going to just splatter around randomly. You can see that mine's starting to drip a little bit. You won't have that problem because I'm working with artwork that's hung up. So you won't have this dripping problem, which is an issue and does affect it. Now we're moving on to the darker blue. So you can fill in any white gaps or go over the top of the light blue, depending on how much light blue you used. I'm going to use a little bit of the turquoise as well. Don't worry if you go over the edge. And lastly, a little bit of purple. Not too much purple. Now, as your paper starts to dry, you can see you might get some bits where you can almost see the paintbrush and that splatter. We want our colours to merge a little bit. So if that happens, just go through with just plain water and try to blend some of your colours together. So you get more of a mixture, a fusion of colours rather than a splattered effect. I'll show you the sample again so you can see. And once it dries, you'll find that the colours mix a lot more anyway as it dries. Just trying to take away some of that splodging with some water. Now, if it's a nice day today, you should go and put this somewhere to dry in the sun. I'm going to put mine to the back. And now we're going to work on our background, and our background is the same technique with a nice clean brush. You might want to get some fresh water. You're going to paint your entire background in water. I'm going to pause my video so you're not watching me do the whole page. I've covered my whole page with water, but then I always come back to where I first added the water because it does dry quite quickly. And this time we're going to be using yellow, orange and red. So we're going to start with our yellow, and I'm going to cover my whole page. Even though we technically don't really need to do the middle here, I'd hate to leave some white around the outside. So just to play it safe, it really doesn't take that long. I'm just going to do the whole lot and make sure I really get all the way to the sides. A good yellow base there. Then I'll start with orange. You can see exactly where my page has started to dry because you get a completely different effect there. So I'll go over that with water later to make sure I get that blended effect. Now moving on to red, which comes out as a nice magenta colour. Okay, and get some water, do some blending. And so even though I'm going to get some water and blend some of these colours, I think I'm going to get some more yellow on my brush as well and put some more yellow in there because I feel like it's been dominated a little bit by the red. Okay, so make sure you pause the video, get your background just how you like it, and I suggest that you wait until both of your bits of paper are dry until you go to the next bit, because once we start adding the permanent marker and start cutting out, we don't want to either rip our artwork or have the art liner run with the water. So make sure both are completely dry. Hope it's a sunny day. Okay, so mine are nice and dry now, and I'm ready to cut out my Taj Mahal. So we're going to cut out the Taj Mahal before we add the black art liner. And when you cut out, I want you to cut out along that first line that you drew there and make that quite straight, because that is going to be stuck along the bottom, right along the bottom there. But if it's not perfectly straight, it also doesn't matter, because we can come along afterwards and snip off anything that might be hanging over the edge. Okay, so cutting out the bottom, I'm going to pause the video again, and I'm going to carefully cut out around my Taj Mahal, making sure that I go over all the details. I'm not going to worry about the little spears. I'm going to cut those off, and I'm going to draw them back in afterwards with the black art liner. Now my Taj Mahal is all cut out. One thing I did forget to get you to do was to erase that middle line there. If your middle line is standing out, it's not too late to get an eraser and just erase that, but only really carefully. Don't worry about it too much if you don't want to rub out the colour. So if you can see the line and you're able, just maybe erase some of that line so it's not so obvious. But that middle line is the only bit that we need to erase, because the rest of it we're going over in art liner. So that middle line is the only one that you don't need to see. And we should be able to stick this directly on the bottom of our artwork, just using stick glue. So completely cover your Taj Mahal with some stick glue and stick it on the bottom of the background that should be in your diary. I'm going to pause my video to do that. Okay, so I've got my Taj Mahal completely covered in glue. I'm going to carefully stick it now on the bottom. Now it's time to start adding the detail with the black texture, and it is one thing that I'm going to do by taking it off this board and resting it on the bench, because I'm not in a very good position here to do it accurately. But again, it doesn't need to be too accurate. We're basically going over all of the lead pencil marks in our original sketch. And I'm going to pause the video whilst I do that. Just be careful around when you're going around the dome shape. You do want your art liner to be on the blue paper, not on the orange and yellow. And also just make sure that that paper is dry, because this texture will run. So that's probably the most trickiest part, is going around the outside parts of the shape. Pretty much gone around almost all of the outside. Still a few little details left to go. And that did take me quite a while. Now I'm going to start adding in some detail that I didn't include in my original sketch. And you can have a bit of fun with this. You might want to Google the Taj Mahal to see what kind of detail there is on the real Taj Mahal. I'm going to just free draw and add a little bit of Indian-inspired henna type design features on there. One thing I am going to do that you should probably do as well is colour in the doors and windows. So I'll quickly do that now. There you go. So you can see there I've just done some little rectangles and some little squares in the windows. And I'm going to add some other detail as well, but you can do whatever you like. We've got to add back in the spikes that we cut off earlier. Going to add in the door and make that quite detailed as the main entrance. As I said, you can add a lot more detail in there, but I'm going to leave mine there so we can move on to the next part, which is adding a henna-inspired art up here. So if you haven't heard of henna before, Indian women will often put henna on their hands, it's a form of a tattoo, but it's not as long lasting. It does wash off eventually. So what I suggest you do for this part is to actually Google henna art and see if you can find some nice designs that you might want to include just in the corner of your artwork here. I'll show you this one. But every time I do one, it always turns out different. They're very swirly in nature, and I make them all for this artwork. I make everything come out of like the one point. So I'm going to pause this again just so you're not watching me do every single tiny little detail. Some little dots so it looks like it's almost raining over the Taj Mahal, and I'm going to stop mine now, but every time you do it, it would be different, so do as much or as little as you like or not at all. So I hope that your Taj Mahal turned out okay. I hope that you're happy with it, and I thank you for joining me, and I can't wait to see you next week for art and hopefully back at school really soon. Bye everyone.